Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another segment of Asaph Cafe. I am your host, Asaph Adonai, and we decided to stay on the National September 11 Memorial set, but this will just be a normal cafe, even though we're using this set. And that's just such a beautiful background,
Yes,
don't you
yes.
think? And New York.
Mm-hmm.
On my left, affectionately, our aging rocker Emmet, and I am Asaph Adonai. We're just going to do a one-on-one, and we're just going to do the normal comical
Yep.
Asaph Cafe. We already did a tribute in the last show to the victims, and we hope their families will be well, and the same with Senator Tester. And on that note, you want to start us off again?
Heavenly Father, God bless our food and our time together in Jesus' name.
And it's 3:01 now, so we have some time.
Yep.
Okay, let's do my traditional theme song. This is such a perfect theme
Yeah,
song.
it is.
You know, one day if I get on a talk show, I hope they play this when they introduce me.
Yes, indeed. Oh, you didn't even get in your ginger ale or the secret ingredient, you
I'll
know?
have some in a moment. I'll take the secret ingredient right now.
All right.
Thank you, my friend. This is a beautiful
It
song.
is. It is.
And the conclusion.
Uh-huh.
I never get tired
Yeah,
of playing this song.
absolutely.
It's just such a beautiful song.
Yeah, I think I first heard it on Easy 102 KUEZ FM back in 1984, 86. Beautiful.
Yeah, This Guy's in Love with You is the name of that song, Burt Bacharach, and Herb
Yeah.
Alpert introduced it to the world at the time. It's just a beautiful song.
It
It always
is.
makes me think of Bob Hope. Do you remember Bob Hope, the comedian of the past?
Yes, I do. I don't think I ever watched
In
him.
his movies, he used to sing a song called "Thanks for the Memories." Thanks for the
Oh,
memories.
yes.
So that went on to become his theme song.
Yeah.
So like he'd be on the Tonight Show with Carson, right? And the band would be playing that theme.
Yeah.
Thanks for the memories. So I hope that someday they'll play.
Yeah, definitely.
This Guy's in Love with You. He's like, hey, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Asaph Adonai, and then they go da 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 da. Come
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
waving.
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll see. But in the meantime, it's a fun theme song here.
Yeah, it is.
So on. It's nice and warm in this studio, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. Thankfully. yeah.
I prefer it warm. Anyway, I was going to tell the television audience the joke about the secret ingredient in case there's somebody watching. that does not
absolutely.
know. In Star Trek V, and I'm going to get it right this time. I said 3 accidentally.
I know.
In Star Trek V, there was a scene where Captain Kirk, Dr. McCoy, and Spock were at Yosemite National Park. If I remember that right. They were on shore leave, and Dr. McCoy was cooking some beans.
Yeah.
And his secret ingredient was alcohol, was gin, alcohol. But they didn't tell Spock what the secret ingredient was.
Yep.
And so Dr. McCoy's making these beans, and he was telling Spock, if you insult these beans, you'll be insulting generations of McCoys, because this is, their family tradition. So Spock's eating the beans, right? He doesn't know there was alcohol in it. And Spock says something about, am I to assume that your secret ingredient is alcohol?
Yep.
And then Captain Kirk says, "We got any more of that secret ingredient?" So I borrowed that as a joke. This is actually Pepsi. We're not drinking on the air.
No, alcohol's not allowed on the set.
No,
You don't drink anyway.
It's just a joke. So when you hear us on Asaph Cafe talk about the secret ingredient, it's actually it's Pepsi. Pepsi is a Coke.
By the way, I think this is the 8th. I think this is the 50th anniversary of Star Trek because I saw.
That's what I was going to talk about that in a moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. In fact, they mentioned that it's 50 years ago this week.
Yes.
That Boy, I'm really dating myself because I lived in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, my father just was stationed in Virginia when we got back from Taiwan, and where we lived, Star Trek came on every Friday night. At 9 o'clock Virginia time at that time. So since my brother and I didn't have to go to school, my parents would let us watch Star Trek. And it's 50 years this week. So we used to watch Star Trek then. Of course, I think I was like in the 3rd or 4th grade or something like that at that time. So I didn't necessarily appreciate Star Trek then as I do now.
Yeah.
Being older. But yeah, I remember watching Star Trek 50 years ago.
Yeah, well, I guess I started watching when I was 5 years old, or 4 or 5, and I loved it so much, and it was on Friday or Saturday night, whenever it came on. I watched it with my mom and dad, and I loved Mr. Spock, so I called myself Baby Mr. Spock. I just loved Star Trek, and I may have told this story. I would pretend that the old Jeep that we used to have, and we were riding around on the dirt roads in Tucson, Arizona in the desert, because it would shake a lot. I was pretending that I was in a spaceship and I was being rocked by phaser fire. Remember when in Star Trek, the Enterprise would get hit by phaser fire or laser fire and have to, go back and forth because the Enterprise was being rocked. And everyone was being rocked. They had that special. But that's what it seemed like to me as a kid. And I just pretended fire. If this was the Jeep, I would be in the background. And I just loved it. So I grew up on science fiction. Isn't that fascinating?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I definitely grew up on it. Yeah.
There's the theme of Star Trek there. But speaking of Star Trek, it comes on Saturday night.
On MeTV, yeah.
On MeTV, yeah.
8 o'clock, yeah.
Every MeTV every Saturday, and I don't know what episode they'll show, but it's always fun to watch Star Trek.
Yeah.
I've been watching Star Trek since I was a little kid.
Exactly.
And they've got a new series coming out in 2017.
I just love it. I'm so fascinated.
I am looking forward to
Definitely.
that. And I assume they'll have the same music,
Yeah.
maybe updated versions
Yeah.
of it and stuff.
Sounds great to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. Just really looking forward to this new Star Trek series. And this one is based on the William Shatner version, not like the
Exactly.
was the Next Generation and Space Line and Voyager. This is the Star Trek.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to it. They said there's going to be more planets, more scenes, and I'm just looking forward to it.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm just a big Star Trek fan. Can you believe it? 50 years.
Yeah, wow. I think on either 194 MeTV or even 176 BBC America, if you get cable, they're showing for the next few days, or at least today, the first and second seasons uncut. So Star Trek's playing right now on TV.
What channel is that?
I think it's either 194, 176 BBC America if you have cable.
Okay. Well, it's just amazing. Let's talk about Star Trek. Star Trek at the time, and it's still relevant even though it's 2016. If you think about it, they dealt with topics at that time that might have seemed controversial.
Yes, they would have, yeah.
But I think that's why that worked, because Star Trek was up against the Westerns.
Exactly.
And so if they had done, like, say, a space Western, I don't think it would have worked.
No, it wouldn't have.
I think it would have been very corny. So with Gene Roddenberry, I saw this little documentary I had.
Yeah.
He decided to write the drama that he always wanted to write. Space, tackling like the interracial,
right,
and all the races on the same ship, and it worked.
It did.
It really worked. I mean, there was talk of sponsors might pull out, but they didn't.
Exactly.
Whereas it would have been one of those Rifleman Chuck Connor, not to pick on that show, in space. I just don't think that would have worked. But like they have like African American lady. prominence.
Yes.
Yeah, and
that was groundbreaking for that time.
Yeah, I'm talking about for that time period.
Yeah.
And then having Mr. Chekhov,
Yeah.
Russian, and Mr. Sulu,
Yeah.
Asian, and it just these were not like servant roles.
Right, exactly.
They were
lieutenants, yeah.
prominent.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to pick on Hollywood, but I know enough about Hollywood that if you look at some of those early movies, 30s and 40s, the African Americans were always like servants.
Yeah, yeah.
Even those like Godzilla movies, it just
Yes.
You know what I'm trying to say is that it was groundbreaking what Star Trek did.
It was.
People of what they call color
Yes.
in prominent roles, and I think that's why that worked.
It did, yes.
And I thought that was brilliant writing.
Yeah.
Gene Roddenberry's part. Can you imagine, like, the actress that plays Uhura? Can you imagine her being like a servant, like serving on a ship? That just wouldn't have worked. No, this is a lieutenant. She was like communications officer.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
And Sulu, his character, helmsman, you know, and navigator.
Chekhov.
Just stuff like that. And how they dealt with the aliens and the cultures, like the Romulans and the Klingons, and you know, stuff like that. And it was just, I think it was very groundbreaking.
It was.
Another thing that was groundbreaking was the first interracial kiss. You know, Star Trek had the first interracial kiss. That episode with William Shatner and Nichelle Nichols. In that one episode, well, see what it was is they weren't kissing because they were in love. They were on this planet with these creatures that had the power to make you do whatever they wanted.
Oh yeah, that was a very good one. Yes.
And they were they were actually
I remember that. Yes.
Antagonizing Captain Kirk and Spock.
I remember that was very good.
And Uhura and Nurse Chapel.
That
to
was
get Dr. McCoy to stay on that planet. Because,
I remember
these
that.
People were so advanced, but they didn't have medical care, so they were doing these things to the crew members to force Dr. McCoy to stay behind.
I remember that was a very good one.
And so, even though they had that kiss, it wasn't like in a romantic setting, but it was still groundbreaking.
Yeah.
And
if I remember, it was the fruit that gave them telepathic powers. They accumulated it over time, and they had
and
they
so
were with
Dr.
the Greek
McCoy
culture.
had to come up with a
potion, you know,
potion to speed up the process to get the humans to be able. And so Captain Kirk said, "Give us double."
Yeah.
And that's how they were able to get control.
Yeah.
But interesting episode. And then another episode that I thought was interesting, the half black, half white.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say that. Yes, very good.
Yeah, the people that were black on the right side
and white on the other.
Yeah, they didn't like the people who were if you're black on the right side, and you saw a person who's white on the right side.
Exactly.
They like each other. And I just thought that was just so groundbreaking.
It was.
To show how stupid racism is. And you know what happened as a result of racism was that the planet, Charon, was destroyed.
It was,
they wiped each other out, and there are only 2 remaining left.
And then they killed each other off in the end. Just
so,
really tragic.
Gene Roddenberry just had a great imagination.
He did.
And there's some other episodes. Well, do you have a favorite Star Trek episode?
Well, that's the Doomsday Machine.
Yeah, that's my personal favorite. William Wyndham, you know what's interesting about that episode? If you think about it, you've got this Commodore who lost his crew, right?
Yes.
So from a psychological, emotional point of view, he's not himself.
Yes.
And that still is kind of relevant if you think about it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I know he ends his life, but just from the psychological point of view, it's interesting.
Absolutely.
Another episode that I like, Spectre of the Gun.
That was an excellent one.
Spectre of the Gun. Yeah, the one where and they were being tested. Remember the warning buoy at the beginning?
Yes.
And the buoy says, "Do not enter this part of space."
Yes.
And what does Captain Kirk do? He disobeys and goes anyway, right?
Yeah.
So they end up on this planet. And the warning buoy said, "You're the captain. You're going to be held responsible for entering our space." And so the Malkotians send Captain Kirk and his crew back to October 26th.
Yes.
You know, the OK corral.
Yep.
I was born on October 26th.
Amazing.
I was memorized. And so Captain Kirk was up against Doc Holliday.
I love that. I love that.
And Wyatt Earp.
Yeah.
And there was, you remember, the old gunfight.
Yes.
OK Corral. And history can't be changed, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, but, you know, and of course Spock, he's all logical.
Yeah.
He figures out and saves the day. He realizes that this wasn't real.
Exactly.
Because, you know, there's certain things in the universe that has to happen. Like when they did the little knockout thing with the gas.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Malkotians were actually testing. And when Captain Kirk did not kill Wyatt Earp, I think it was Wyatt Earp, after he beat the snot out of him. I mean, that fight scene, Captain Kirk oh my goodness. And then he picks up the gun and he's like going to shoot him because they thought Chekhov was dead. All of a sudden he goes, I'm not going to kill you.
Yeah.
The Malkotians were watching that, and that's how they got that peace treaty.
Yep.
But you know, just stuff like that. I mean, you know, Captain was already at his breaking point. He lost one crew member. He gets sent back into the past, and he still has compassion. And there was another episode, the Gorn.
Yes,
Remember the one when he was fighting the Gorn?
Absolutely. That was a wonderful one.
And he showed, and the Metrons were watching.
Yes, that was very good.
And you know, what's interesting about that at the end, after Captain Kirk shoots his little cannon and disables the captain of the Gorn ship, he could have killed that Gorn. And the Metrons are watching. He says, "We didn't expect this of you, Captain Kirk. You showed the advanced trait of mercy."
Yeah.
So because he showed mercy to the very person who would have killed him if the tables were turned, that caught the
exactly.
the interest of the
and the interesting thing is these were filmed during the Vietnam War and the whole thing. That's why the whole concept of war and peace, you know, was very, you know, popular in the Star Trek series. That's what they wanted to talk about, the morality of war. They were morality plays. These were it was fantastic.
Yeah, but you know, that show was just so groundbreaking, and
it was.
And the topics they covered.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why it worked. And now some 50 years later, they're still
exactly
Star Trek, and it's just really an amazing phenomenon.
It
to
is.
Think about it. And there are other science fiction shows. I understand that, but I just think that you have to agree, Star Trek.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And when you and I are gone, there'll probably still be.
There will. Yep.
Showing Star Trek.
Yeah.
And, you know, talk about Gene Roddenberry. What an imagination
exactly
he had as a kid. Imagining his parents. That just is mind-boggling because he, you know, he didn't raise himself, and all that stuff had to be in him. All that imagination stuff as a little boy. It's just amazing. What an imagination Gene Roddenberry
absolutely
had.
And they were just well-written stories, so even if you've seen them all your life, you still love them. They were just the best. They're still the best show pretty much on TV.
And I'll tell you another one episode, since we're talking Star Trek. Let's just talk about Star Trek. The Corbinite maneuver.
Yes, I remember that one.
And I just got that one memorized too.
Yeah.
And it was really that little alien that was bored, and it was testing.
Yeah.
And so they passed that test. But boy, with that little alien put that ship through. With that big old ship. And then of course, there's some other episodes that were.
Well, I remember one. I was trying to think of two that I liked. Do you remember the first time they did encounter the Romulans?
Yeah, that was
a
Balance of Terror.
Yeah, that was very good. That was just a personal contest between the Enterprise and that Romulan ship and long hour space war.
And it was the introduction to the cloaking device.
It was, yes.
Because the Romulans had developed that. So when they had a second episode later, Captain Kirk sneaked on board that Romulan ship and took the cloaking device.
I was going to say that because that was a very good one because you didn't know the twists and turns that were happening. I don't want to give the ending away, but
everybody's seen it. It's 50 years old.
Well, basically, let's say you had seen it for the first time in 1967 or 68. You would have thought Captain Kirk's losing his mind. He's so ill-tempered. And then when they went, then they went to into Romulan territory. They were captured.
Yeah, and surrounded by 3 Romulan ships.
Exactly, and then they were captured, and he started screaming, you know, and then Mr. Spock said the captain is not sane. He did it on his own violation, and then you know there was this Vulcan death trip, and we almost thought Captain Kirk was dead, but it was all an act ordered by Starfleet to get the new Romulan cloaking device.
That cloaking device. So
that was real well done.
Yeah, and Spock was like James Bond to me.
Yeah.
Because he was having this relationship with.
Yeah, he was.
but not because it was romantic. He had a hidden agenda.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what James Bond does.
Yeah,
in the
that
movie,
was just absolutely a wonderful one. Yeah.
Another one of my favorites is the one with Elena Troy. The lady that she was like supposed to marry this Trojan
Oh yes, yes,
to have a peace treaty.
yes.
But she was spoiled.
I remember that.
So they had to go at sublight speed to have time to train her.
Oh yeah.
To quit being such a savage.
Absolutely, yeah.
Before taking her to that planet.
And that also had the Klingons or something, and yeah, that was very good. Yeah, that was very good.
Yeah, and there were a bunch of spies on.
Yep.
On that episode there too, and one of the spies, I think he was I can't remember the name of the character, but he attacks Captain Kirk and nearly kills him.
Yes.
In that episode, and so. Oh, let me say it again.
Wait, wasn't that another episode?
That's a different episode.
Yeah, that was.
Okay, let's talk about the first one. It's called the Babel episode.
Yeah,
that's
the Tower of Babel.
Yeah, that's the one that introduced Spock's father.
Yes, I was thinking about that. That was a very good one.
And
Mother and father. Yeah, very good.
Spock's father had this heart condition, and it took a certain type of blood.
Yeah.
And Spock was the only one that could give that.
Yeah.
But they had to filter out the human elements. And so, when Captain Kirk gets injured, Spock's priority was the ship instead of his father.
Yeah.
So they had to psych him out.
Yeah.
Making Captain Kirk go to
exactly.
the bridge and pretending he was okay when he was really hurt. Interesting episode.
And then they were in. There was something about wasn't it the Klingons or the Romulans attacking because they were under attack by some space battle or something.
It was, yeah.
There was an Andorian spy.
Andorians, that's it.
Yeah, that was in the Andorian. Yeah.
Now, getting back to the Elena Troy, that's the episode where the Klingons wanted those crystals.
Yes, the dilithium crystals. Yes.
Yeah, they want and so she was wearing it around her neck. And
yes.
So they took the jewelry from her neck and made improvised crystals.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but my point is, Star Trek is just such a neat show. And even though it only lasted 3 seasons originally, it really started taking off when it went into syndication.
Yeah, it did.
And I just think, I'm not an executive at NBC, but it seems to me like they should have kept that series going at the time.
They should have. I heard one thing that canceled it. When I was a kid, I used to get a magazine called Starlog. It was all about science fiction, heroic fantasy. It was an actual just behind the scenes and that kind of thing. I don't know if I heard it from that magazine, read in that magazine, or maybe a book about Star Trek. But the William Shatner and Leonard McCoy, William Shatner, and the person that played Mr. Spock. Now I've forgotten his name. What was
Nimoy?
Leonard Nimoy? Yeah. Why didn't I forget that guy's name? They actually were enemies. They could not stand each other. They were competing with each other. They thought they were taking over each other's, positions as an actor. And even William Shatner was getting ulcers. They could not work together. They hated each other. They just, I don't know what happened, but they just,
I think they went on to become good friends,
They did, finally. But at first it was just a disaster.
Well, I'm not an actor or anything, but I would imagine there are a lot of temperaments with
they
actors,
are, yeah.
Because some are like already stars. Like Lost in Space, for example. I saw a documentary with the actor that played Dr. Smith. What was his name? Zachary Harris?
Yeah.
I can't remember his full name. But anyway, Lost in Space started focusing more on Dr. Smith and the robot instead of the serious episodes that they had.
I know.
And that didn't sit well with the actor Guy Williams for what I've seen in documentaries. And, I'm not trying to pick on Guy Williams. I'm just, because he was a fine actor, especially in Zorro. I'm just saying that there's probably temperaments, in the acting field. And I don't know, I wasn't there, but I look at it like this, it's a job, and people should just...
I agree.
...treat it as a job, and if the directors want to do whatever, it's their thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But, like Hollywood, some actors just... they just get all... I don't know what the word is. Uppity, I guess, is the word. But
I did read in Starlog in around 1980 or 79 or 80, after Star Trek the Motion Picture, because anytime I would go to the grocery store or something, if Starlog was there, I'd ask my mom to, get an issue of Starlog, because it was all about how science fiction was made, upcoming movies, TV shows, interviews with actors of science fiction television, conventions, whatever. They had wanted to make a new Star Trek series with William Shatner and Leonard McCoy, kind of based on, after the events of Star Trek the Motion Picture. They wanted to make it for, whatever, and put it on network television. It never got made.
Really? I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, I was on Starlog, and they even though it was aborted and they didn't exactly, make that series, I got to read some of the episode synopsis, the synopsis of some of the episodes, at least of the first season. I wasn't impressed. I can't remember what they were talking about, but I thought it was kind of disturbing. I even heard, one time, this was very disturbing, and I think there may have been a lot of Star Trek fan outcry, and they decided to cancel the idea of the series, the new series, but this is very disturbing, and there was even angry letters to the editor, called communications.
I hadn't heard, but keep on.
And anyway, there was one episode that they had planned that they had to save Starfleet. Something had happened back in the Civil War that changed the history of Starfleet. And I think they went back to that time machine, that time tunnel, that portal, whatever it was, whatever. I can't even remember that. Do you remember that portal that they went back to 1930s and saved Starfleet?
Yeah,
and I can't remember.
Is that the one with Edith Keeler?
Yes.
Yeah, it was some sort of well, Dr. McCoy was accidentally medicated.
Yes.
He went through that time portal.
Yeah, and
the episode, the Germans wound up winning World War II.
Exactly.
And that was a change of history with Edith Keeler. I think that was a brilliant imagination.
That was a great one. But
so Kirk had to go back in time and fix that. So she had to die to prevent the Germans from winning.
That was very good, and I didn't mind that. But on this one, I don't know if they had the same time machine or something, because it's been so many years since I read it. But there was something with the Civil War, and that because Abraham Lincoln lived and survived the assassination, there was no more Starfleet, no Federation.
And that was Star Trek?
Yeah, they were going to have an episode where Mr. Spock snuck in and killed Abraham Lincoln to save the pet. I would have been so mad.
Yeah, that wouldn't have been good, I don't think.
Yeah, there were a lot of angry letters to the editor saying, we won't even watch Star Trek ever again if Mr. Spock kills Abraham Lincoln. To me, that's treason. That's wrong.
I know. I hadn't heard about that, but I think I have to agree with you from what I'm seeing. I don't think that would have been a good idea.
No, and thankfully, they just decided,
Now, they did have an episode with Abraham Lincoln on Star Trek.
That was a good one. That was different.
It was very good, because what it was is those acid creatures, I guess.
Yeah, they were rock acid type creatures. Yeah.
They wanted to know what the concept of
good and evil. Yes.
And of course, because they don't know, and of course, good always triumphs over evil. So these acid creatures just needed to know that.
Yes.
So they had Abraham Lincoln, who was a idol for Captain Kirk.
Yes.
And I forget the Vulcan.
Image of Serac.
Yeah, Image of Serac for Spock.
Not Serac, but Serac. Yeah.
And that was interesting.
That was a very good one, and a lot of good action too.
Yeah. And then of course they had like the villains.
Yes. Yeah.
Against good, and of course good wins.
Yeah.
But at first, Captain Kirk didn't want to go along with it. So what the acid creatures did was they put his ship in jeopardy, which caused him to have to fight for his ship.
Yeah.
So that they could see good versus evil. And what was good is good triumph.
Exactly.
And that's what I like. Good always triumphs over bad, and that's
exactly.
But my point is, Gene Roddenberry just had a great imagination.
I still have somewhere, I think, all my Starlogs in a box. I hope I have them in my closet, but yeah, they don't make Starlog magazine. I wish they did, but it was a great magazine for its time, and I would reread it over and over again, old Starlog episodes. If I wasn't watching science fiction, if it was Saturday afternoon or doing something, just reread Starlog. Just loved it. It was very well done. It was a wonderful magazine. What? It was just a wonderful magazine.
Right, the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that was just fascinating. It had a lot of fascinating interviews, and it finally it faded out.
But my birth mom, my brother and I, we tried to get her to watch Star Trek. She couldn't get past Mr. Spock's ears to look at the context of it.
Yeah.
And I can understand it because I guess for some women, I guess it's a guy thing, Star Trek. Because my birth mom, she never would watch Star Trek. She couldn't get past those ears.
Yeah.
And I can understand that. I mean, people don't have pointed ears.
Yeah.
But Star Trek's fun. And another thing that's interesting to me is when they had the pilot to Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yes.
They had Dr. McCoy on there.
They did, yeah.
And there was a scene on there where, how he doesn't like to beam up.
Yeah.
And he was like 130-something years old at that point. So he gets in the shuttlecraft to go on the Enterprise, and he meets Data for the first time. He's like, "You don't have no points on your ears, boy.
Yeah.
You sound like a Vulcan."
Yeah.
And Data says, "I'm an android. Just as bad."
Yeah.
Because they were talking about Dr. McCoy's age.
Yeah.
Because Dr. McCoy's something like 130-something years old. And Dr. McCoy said to Data, "How do you know my age?" Data says, "I remember every fact that's exposed to me, sir." And that's what he says, "I don't see no points on
Yeah.
But you sound like a Vulcan."
Yeah.
"I'm an android." And then they just start talking
exactly,
about that was just such a cute scene.
Yeah. Do you remember the Star Trek animated series that came out around 1972, 73?
It was a cartoon, Star Trek cartoon. It was okay.
Yeah, I didn't care for it that much. I watched it because back when I was a kid, I'd watch anything science fiction, even if it was lousy.
Yeah.
I was that much of science, but the stories were kind of flat a lot of the ways.
Well, you gotta remember, it's a cartoon too, so they probably wanted to write episodes that children could understand.
I guess so, yeah.
If you think about it. You couldn't have a cartoon series like the series. I don't think that would.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
That's just my opinion. I don't know. But I thought it was pretty cool though. I used to watch that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Star Trek cartoon.
But even they talked about this in Starlog, and I agree. It came out, or maybe it was a book. I think it was a book on Star Trek. It wasn't the series. It wasn't Starlog, but the fans met the cartoon with mixed results and mixed views. And the aliens they would have on there, as far as the bridge crew, they were just aliens. They didn't really do anything.
You gotta remember, you're dealing with children too, so they probably didn't have intense plot line like the series. And there are other science fiction shows. Land of the Giants. Speaking of Land of the Giants,
yes,
that comes on Saturday night, Sunday morning. They announced it on MeTV. They're going to show.
Oh yes,
they're doing a tribute to Irwin Allen, the creator of Time Tunnel that I told you about.
Yeah.
Time Tunnel, Lost in Space, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Probably. Well, he did Earthquake and Towering Inferno. I don't know if they're going to show those. I think they're going to show more of the movies. And doing an Irwin Allen tribute on MeTV, and one of the episodes is Land of the Giants.
Wonderful.
And I'm gonna sit up late this Saturday night, and I'm gonna get that VCR.
Wonderful.
I'm gonna tape every single one, because you know what I think they're gonna show is probably the pilot.
Yeah, hey, that would be great. I wish my VCR worked, because I would be using to do the same thing, because I don't like to stay up late anymore. I
can make you a copy of it.
Oh, that'd be wonderful, yeah.
Because I have one of those dual.
That'd be great, yeah.
Item, so I'm gonna
thanks.
It, and I can just transfer and make you one.
Oh, thanks. That'd be great. Yeah, if I could see Land of the Giants, that was a classic. Yeah.
Well, I don't know what episode. I have no idea. I assume they're gonna show the pilot episodes. Like the one that scene with that cat.
Oh, that was great. Yeah. Yeah.
But with all the science fiction shows, Space 1999 and so on, I think Star Trek is just ultimately.
It is.
But I did like Land of the Giants, and I'm surprised they haven't made a Land of the Giants movie.
That would have been great, yeah, in that same style.
If I were a filmmaker or whatever, I would do that. I saw an interview with the actor Don Marshall that played the co-pilot, and he even commented, "How come they haven't made a Land of the Giants movie?" It had a theme that went something like this.
Yep.
Something like that.
Yeah, I saw it for a couple of weeks in Seattle because my stepfather had to have an operation that was only going to be done in Seattle, so I was in a hotel. And it came on, Land of the Giants came on in syndication. every afternoon at a certain time, and I got to see
what
it.
was interesting about Land of the Giants is if you really pay attention to that show, all the movie stars of that era appeared. They were giants. I mean, top name entertainers, and I found that interesting. But I like the plot line, the pilot plot line. They were in a ship called the Spindrift. Let's talk about this for a second.
The Spindrift?
That's the name of the ship. The Spindrift. What's the name of the
Well,
ship?
it sounds like Spin Dry. Oh, I didn't even know it was a Spindrift. Oh, the Spindrift. Oh.
Hey, let me clear my throat. I want to tell the TV audience.
I can't believe it. The Spin Dry. Not the Spindrift, but the Spin Dry. Oh.
Anyway, the Spindrift, Captain Burton is the captain. And they had a crew on the ship, and they were on their way to London. Going through space on their way to London. And there was this anomaly, this cloud that was like a magnet in space, and it sucked the Spindrift into it, and they wound up on this planet, with giants. Everything was 12 times the size of the little people, but the little people had the technology. See, the giants, they were way back, say the 50s, in comparison, and it was just such a neat storyline because they didn't know they were on this planet of giants. They thought they were in London, so Captain Burton and the co-pilot go out, and then there's this big giant car that and they duck for their lives, right? And the car just goes right over them, right? And then they see this giant car that went over them, and then they hear these footsteps like this, big giant footsteps. And then they start running back to the ship. Everybody strap in, we're taking off. What's going on? And then all of a sudden you hear this this music, and this giant picks up this spaceship. And they're trying to fly away, and then they finally get away from that giant, right? And they're 5,000 feet up in the air, there's still buildings all around. Then they knew they were in trouble. So they had to land because they didn't have the power to get back into orbit at that time. And so they go on, they land for a second time, and Commander Fitzhugh had stolen $1 million, so he sneaks off the ship, right? Because nobody believed at first that they were on this planet with giants. And so Barry, the little boy, follows Fitzhugh. And then all of a sudden, while they're gone, Captain Burton's looking for him, right? And then they had this scene where Fitzhugh says, we better get back to the ship. The little boy says, we better get back to the ship, right? And then all of a sudden you hear this da-da-da, this music. And all of a sudden, there's this cat that's like, rah! And he takes his paw and he smacks the suitcase out of Fitzhugh's hand, and the $1 million goes flying around. He's like, my money! And I'm thinking, you better forget about that money and get away from that cat.
Definitely.
So they run away from the cat, right? And he's like, open up. So the co-pilot opens up the ship, and Fitzhugh the boy gets in there. We gotta get out of here. That thing is after us. And all of a sudden, that co-pilot opens that door, and that cat like that, rah, and he closes the door. And so the cat's trying to get inside the spaceship. I mean, this is brilliant writing.
It is.
And so then they had another scene where now Captain Burton was not around when that was happening. And there was a scene where he's looking around trying to find Fitzhugh and the boy before the cat almost got him. And all of a sudden these big giant spiders come.
Oh boy,
And so Captain had to run for his life to get away from the spiders. And then one of the passengers sneaks off the ship because she wants to look around and see it. And so then there was these big mouse traps, I guess is the way to describe it. The captain told that lady, don't go in there, leave that thing alone. She's like, don't worry, I won't buy it without my lawyer's advice. And she's hard-headed, right? So she goes in there anyway, and then the captain goes in there trying to get her out. All of a sudden the door closes. And then they're trying to get out of that little trap, and here comes this big giant. He just grabs all the traps. And it was just such an intense scene. And then when the giants discover there's little people, they tape them up on this table. They're poking them with pencils, experimenting with them. And so the co-pilot Dan and Mark have to go and try to rescue them. So Mark does a diversion he has his little razor. It's like this big giant razor, and he hits the gas line in the giant's house, which causes the explosion. Gives him time to climb up there and take this giant knife and cut the tape to set them free. And so then the giant sees that his 2 specimens are gone, and then he sees a bunch of little people running out of the house, and he gets this big butterfly net trying to grab him for a second time. And then the little people, they get away, right? They're like going through this tunnel, and the giant grabs and swoops on Dan. And so Commander Fitzhugh had this little gun. And he was scared. The little boy was like, you gotta do something. So the little boy grabs Commander Fitzhugh's hand, and when Fitzhugh shoots the gun, it stuns the giant in the leg. And he drops the butterfly net. That's how they get Dan out of there. And they go through this hole. And that giant's peeking at her, come back. I would have shot that giant right in his eye.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But they didn't do that, see? He got this giant in there peeking at him. And then all of a sudden, he goes and puts his hand in there trying to grab the little people. Fitzhugh takes that gun and just... I love that music. Dun, dun.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And then, after they get away from that giant, they're like in this dump, right? And they're resting for a while. All of a sudden, this boxer dog.
Oh, yeah.
And so some of the people hide in this little egg cart, and this dog is like trying to get in that cart to get him.
Yeah.
And Captain Burton takes his little jacket off, and there's like this I don't know, what do you call it? Ammonia stuff.
Yes.
And he throws his jacket, and it causes an explosion and scares the dog off. But as fun as that show was, it still couldn't compare to Star Trek.
Right. One series, though, I think that does compare to Star Trek, and I don't know if I've talked about this a lot. Do you remember the groundbreaking series Battlestar Galactica in 1970? I loved that. And when I first saw the pilot for Battlestar Galactica, the 3-hour thing, I was not impressed. I thought it copied Star Wars too much, and some of the spaceship geometry of the spaceships and the way the lasers were doing, I was kind of confused. So I didn't watch it for a couple of weeks, and I decided, well, I might as well try it again just to see what I think if I really don't like it. And then I fell in love with Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, it was an interesting show.
I loved it.
Space 1999, all those shows.
No, Battlestar Galactica, Space 99 was great, but Battlestar Galactica was even better. Same with Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, fantastic.
Yeah, all that, but when you put all those shows together, Star Trek is...
Yeah.
But I did enjoy Land of the Giants.
Yeah, definitely.
It comes on set, and this will be probably the first time that show has been on television in years.
Yeah.
It'll be on MeTV. Now, I don't know what time because they're just doing a tribute to Irwin Allen. So it might not show till 4 in the morning. I don't care. I'm going to stay up all night. I'm going to just be taping. I'm going to wait till... I think it starts at midnight our time when they do this tribute to Irwin Allen. And I'm just going to pop the tape in and just let it play.
Well, I have an idea. Maybe what you could do is put the tape in. If it's a 6-hour VHS tape, from the beginning, then put it in, put record, and then go to bed, and turn the television off and just let it record. And when you wake up, it'll be ready for you. I've often done do that many times.
Yeah, but I do want to see that Land of the Giants because
well, it'll be on tape for you in the daytime, so you can see it.
But see, the thing about that series is it's so hard to find.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why I have an interest in that, and plus I want to make sure nothing goes wrong if I'm taping it. I have nothing to do Sunday morning anyway, so it'll be good to see that. But I think that show is pretty much forgotten. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, and it was kind of, it's really sad because it was a fascinating show. Just what I saw was a fascinating show.
It was such a fun show.
Yeah.
But see, the Giants didn't trust the little people.
Right.
Because the little people were more technically advanced because they had a spaceship, and these guys didn't. But and Time Tunnel was fun too. You know the premise of Time Tunnel?
No, I don't.
Well, see, we still got some time. Basically, the premise of Time Tunnel, there were these 2 scientists that they were out in the desert and they were like underground, and they built this fascinating like city under the ground, and the government was funding it, but the government was getting impatient because they were spending millions and millions of dollars, and so the government was threatening to pull the plug on that project. And so one of the inventors of the Time Tunnel said, I'm going to prove that this thing works, even though it wasn't quite ready. So he goes inside that time tunnel and he starts going back in time, and then his assistant gets in there too, and so that's how they both got trapped in a time tunnel. But what was interesting in this one episode I saw, they went back to the time of the Titanic. You know, the night that ship was going to sink. And so these two time travelers, they couldn't tell who they were, but they were pleading with the captain. Captain, you've got to turn this ship around. Something bad is going to happen. And the captain didn't believe these two. And they thought that they were either just drinking too much or something, so the captain had them put in quarantine. But there was one passenger on that ship who believed what these strangers were saying, and that's how come she didn't die that night. And what was interesting about the time tunnel is just before the two inventors of the tunnel were going to be killed, the other people that were in the future monitoring the ship was watching. And they would always save them when they go back into the time tunnel. And the people in that time zone were trying to figure out a way to get the two inventors back into the present. But the time tunnel, if they had just waited, you know, then they would have been able to get them back. So each week they were in a different time period, whether it's the Titanic or the Civil War or, you know, something like that. And it was just such a fun imagination show.
Yeah, cool.
The time tunnel.
We've never talked about this. It's kind of a new science fiction topic. I don't think we've ever talked about Doctor Who. Do you remember the series from the 60s and 70s, the British one?
I don't know that series very well.
I loved it. I don't like the newer things of Doctor Who, the newer actors that they have, but I loved Tom Baker. You know, the one with the scarves out of jelly babies, and he had curly hair and the floppy hat, kind of a trench coat. The premise of Doctor Who, at least they've really changed it and made it more yuppified. I don't get, but the original premise was the original Doctor. I can't remember his name, Jenna something. Basically, he was, you know, a parole professor from a planet Gallifrey. He traveled in a time machine called a TARDIS. But originally, they wanted to do it a historical, you know, history type of science fiction thing where they would teach history with this one doctor to go back in different eras and teach history to children.
Right.
And it was going to be very intellectual, just time machine as a background. But then they said, we're going to put an alien robot in called a Dalek. We're going to make it more science fiction. And that just exploded. And let's say if the actors had to leave for whatever reason, they got around this pretty well. It was very low budget that from a Gallifreyan, from that, if he died, he would regenerate and he'd have a new face and a new body. So that's how they'd explain the new actors.
Right. I see.
Well,
I'm not as familiar with
it's fantastic. It was real intelligent. I love it when they did with the Daleks and the Zygons, some of the other, you know, space creatures, or some of the other things with other planets. It's just more the Doctor using his wit to, you know, get out of bad situations. They always had guests with him, kind of travelers with him from Earth, and just he wanted to save the cosmos from evil in the universe, and that was against Gallifreyan law. He was interfering with the laws of time and space, and he almost got on trial for it by the other Time Lords. But it was real good writing. The Tom Baker was funny. He was just this funny doctor who had a sense of humor, and he, you know, wore, you know, this trend with the scarves and everything. But he just well done, just fun stuff and some serious stuff too. But it was well done.
That's cool.
Yeah, and they were funny. They were funny doctors. They had personality quirks. They were kind of quirky. They were eccentric. The Doctor was an eccentric.
Well, there's always an eccentric. That's what makes those characters work.
Exactly.
Well, you know, if you do get to see any of these shows Saturday, you can go back in time and see them.
Exactly.
I'm gonna tape it so I can make you a copy.
And that might be a good idea because I'll probably be asleep at 4 a.m. in the morning.
Well, I don't know. They didn't say what time these shows are coming on. They just said they're doing a tribute or an Allen.
Yeah.
So I've
got to get up for church that morning.
I know, but I can make you a copy of it.
Please, that'd be great.
The whole thing.
That'd be
I'll
great.
just be taping all night because I want to have that as a collection.
That's wonderful.
Because see, they may put Land of the Giants at 2 in the morning. I don't know. They didn't say.
Yeah, I'll be asleep. So.
Well, I'm gonna stay up. I'm already having popcorn. Everything. I'm just gonna watch Erwin Allen movies.
Yeah.
But
that's fascinating.
It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. I couldn't find that Land of the Giants anywhere. Excuse me.
Yeah. You know, I don't like the newer Doctor Who's. I know I've been debated with a friend of mine about the newer Doctor Who's. The newer actors, they're not eccentric. some of them more yuppified. This old elderly person is kind of cool, but he's just more serious. See, the doctor was always an eccentric and doing something eccentric, like.
Well, that's what makes that work when they do the eccentric thing.
But now the new doctors are not eccentric. Like one of the earlier doctors always had a flute type of recorder, and it was kind of more like a gentle clown. Who was the one before Tom Baker? I can't.
Well, I don't know that series very well. So
I can't remember the one who played the third Doctor. I don't remember his name. I should. But he was kind of more of an old gentleman who enjoyed the finer things of life. It was kind of an old gentleman detective, but very kind of swashbuckler type and very good. But Tom Baker, he was so eccentric, and he always ate jelly beans. Would you like a jelly bean? Would you like a jelly? Oh yeah, I like candy. And like, this is very. I mean, he was just so eccentric and funny and ridiculous, and it's just made it work. Just.
Yeah, we're almost out of time. I wanted to share a quick story. I think I told this story before. You know, when Battlestar Galactica was popular.
Yes.
I played for the Jeffrey Foundation for the disabled children at that time, and they invited me to stay there for 3 days. So we went on this tour of Universal Studios. I'll take some more of that secret ingredient.
Excellent.
Where we went to this tour where they had the Cylons, you know, the little red-eyed.
Oh, yes.
And of course, these were just children. They didn't know any better, and they freaked out because they thought it was real.
I know.
They really thought it was real. So we had to comfort these little children.
Yeah, and they probably had never seen the show.
No, it was just a tour.
I mean, yeah.
But my final question about time travel, and we're going to talk about the Bible for a second. If you could go back in time, what period of the Old Testament would you go back to? I would like to see the fight with David and Goliath.
You know, I wonder, this is a loaded theological question. I wonder if we should save this for another episode, but would it violate time and space or even God's laws to go back to the time of Adam and Eve? I would try to go back before the fall and convince Adam, don't eat that apple. This is what's going to happen in your and try and change history. But would that be breaking the laws of time and space? I don't know, but
maybe we could talk about it on a future show. But
that's what I would do.
If I could go back in time, I'd like to see the fight with David and Goliath. And I'd also like to see Noah, the flood. Can you imagine?
Oh, yeah.
Think about it. It took Noah 120 years to build that ark.
Yeah.
And then after that, 7 more additional days were given. And the people didn't repent.
Yeah.
But we could save that for... Yeah, maybe we can use our imagination.
Because that's what I would do. I would try and prevent the fall. But then again, would that be breaking God's, because
I don't
God allowed
know. That's
this?
Just something.
It would change all human history if I convince it.
When you get to heaven, you can ask.
I will. I will ask our Lord that. Absolutely. Would that have been? That would be fascinating. Yeah. I'm going to do that. That's one of my new things. When I go to heaven, that's going to be one of my new goals.
And
we'll ask our Lord.
We can use our imagination and talk about the Old Testament and time travel. And,
I think that's an excellent idea.
So I'll make a note of that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we're just talking science fiction, which is always fun, and it's fun to talk about science fiction with this beautiful scenery.
Yes.
And this is a normal cafe. I didn't do much piano playing, but it sure was fun talking about Land of the Giants.
It was.
And I will be looking forward to watching that show this weekend.
Yes.
Anyway, I am Asaph and Emmet, your host. This is Asaph Cafe.
Yes.
And the premise of this show, I invite a guest normally every week, and they just talk to me as I play the piano.
Yeah, I wasn't able to come last week because my allergies were so bad.
Okay.
I wasn't able to do it. I couldn't have made
Scott sat in with you last week, and it was interesting.
Scott? Oh, yeah. Oh, that's good.
So on my immediate left, we have our aging rocker, Emmet. And it's always fun to talk science fiction. So we should do that. We'll do a cafe where we'll use our imagination.
I think that is a great idea. Yeah.
We'll do that on a future show. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, and until our next show, ladies and gentlemen, Maranatha. Freeze on next word. That will be fun to use our imagination in the future.
Yep.
Well, make yourself at home, and I'll shut everything down.
Oh, thanks. Oh, can I put my watch on back? Or?